you for everybody who's on the call right now. We're really excited about this webinar. It's the first time we partner with Climate Earth and have Climate Earth come and present at one of our webinars. Climate Earth is the first global provider of on-demand digital EPDs and business intelligence tools for the concrete industry. And I'm really excited to have Hossein Tavakoli and Brian Davis here, who they're gonna teach us a bit more about what they do and how they help the industry move forward with providing on-demand EPDs. Um, so Hussein is the director of North American LCA and EPD services. He's an experienced environmental engineer, combining his experience as a civil engineer, managing construction projects with a PhD in environmental sustainability engineering from Michigan Technological University. Hussein's expertise includes life cycle assessment, renewable energy, water resources, air quality, and solid hazardous waste. His construction experience includes supervision and field engineering on a diverse range of commercial construction, concrete bridges, demolition, and roadway projects. And Brian joined Climate Earth in August of 2022. Before his role here, he spent over a decade at Oldcastle. His background includes positions in research and development, technical services, and regional sales. Brian's strength lies in cultivating robust customer relationships by leveraging his extensive experience in the concrete industry and aligning with customer priorities and showcasing profound product knowledge. His expertise enables him to provide valuable insights and recommendations for new projects, allowing Climate Earth to enhance its product portfolio and address the evolving requirements of our clientele. And with that, I'm going to hand it off to Hossein.
Right, cool. Thanks for the introduction. So let me share my screen, and then let's just do that. It's a pleasure being here. I hope you guys can see my screen, right? Right, all right, cool. So we all know about EPDs and what they are. I mean, we have passed that moment that EPDs used to be a checkbox. The same pathways that the nutritional label that. And that's good news because people are looking at numbers and trying to make decisions based on that. And they're trying to reduce their impacts accordingly. So this is awesome news. And today we're gonna address that. So we all know about EPD. So I'm not gonna go through like typical things about how to generate an EPD or what an EPD is. I'm gonna tell more about beyond the EPD and how we can use EPDs to be more sustainable and maybe economically beneficial eventually. So a brief background, I mean, as which is really, really important to mention every single time is concrete in this industry is responsible for 8% of global warming potential. So we have to do something. Good news is producers and big corporations and some specific states or countries, they are moving forward towards net zero. And then they're pushing concrete producers to reduce their impact eventually. And that's something that you can observe by checking like LinkedIn accounts or news and everywhere. So that's a great thing. And we are moving towards that pathway. So in order to do that, there are certain action items to do. Number one, you need to have transparency. And transparency means having an EPD. In order to have an EPD, there are two ways to do that. Old-fashioned way of doing it is just manually doing data collection and modeling in Gavi, Pro, OpenLCA, exporting results, and then manually creating an EPD in probably a Word doc and exporting it into a PDF and verifying that one by one, which would take forever, right? It's not the pathway anymore. These days, there are tools and services that have automated this system. And in order to do that, the whole process is, sorry, someone is calling me. The whole process is first doing the company data collection. We need raw materials, which in LC Word, we call them A1. We need to know where the suppliers are located and then eventually calculate the distances and the transportation modes. In LC Word, we call that A2. And then we need to know how much utilities usually consume on average to produce the finished products. So in LC Word, we call them A3. So we have to collect that information. We usually just collect them in any format. We can import them into our system easily, and we can just do it in a few hours. And then we can generate project reports automatically and send it out for verification on your behalf. So that's our daily business these days. And then after your initial data is verified by third party, then you guys can generate EPDs, which is a typical thing for companies with softwares for this purpose, including ours. But along with these tools, we are also committed, and we must be committed to give you more specific information in order to reduce your impacts if you are pushed to or if you are motivated to. So this is a screenshot of a mixed design and from a demo plant that we have, and obviously a hypothetical mixed design. And then you guys can see there are nice graphs and an ugly table next to it, which is pretty helpful for us to investigate. And those graphs are something that you guys can use for your environmental reports. But technically, it shows the contribution of each module or each stage of production in the total GWP. So obviously, you can see A1, which is described as raw materials, are major drivers or hotspots. A2 is number 2, and A3, which is the amount of utilities you guys consume on average. It's like the third place in contribution in GWP or embodied carbon. And if you want to break it down, you can obviously see like cement is the major driver of everything. But if you look at the table, actually, then you can investigate more data out of it. This EPD has an impact of 307 kilograms of carbon dioxide per cubic meter. And then you can see 226 kilograms of carbon dioxide is coming from the cement material. And transportation of the cement material is fine. So in this hypothetical case, they have a local supplier. But what if they purchase cement from Turkey or Greece? I mean, definitely the A2 impact would be much, much higher than you see on my screen. And then the next major driver is lightweight aggregates, which is definitely manufactured lightweight aggregates in this case. And then you see it has a huge impact on our GWP. And if you guys are pushed by Amazon, by state laws, or anyone to meet a certain criteria for your GWP, this table is the very, very first step. First, you need to know the major drivers. So if aggregates or silica film or whatever, they are not drivers, you don't need to change your supplier or do anything about them. First, you need to know what is going on here and then try to think wise. So the whole goal here is, and this is just a step number 1, then we need to do technical economic analysis and other carbon-based analysis to make sure the alternative solution is a good solution and doable solution, right? So the whole goal here is like, we have passed that moment that you guys were just making decisions based on finances or availability of resources, especially after COVID, we experienced shortage, right? I think it's the right time for us to make carbon-based decisions. We have to embed carbon into our decision-making criteria, and we have to consider that as one of the things, especially in certain areas like in California, that carbon footprint is a key decision-making thing. So the whole goal here to inform you about details of every single EPD, either hypothetical or actual, and then try to help you reduce your impact as much as possible. So if you replace this cement with a fly ash or silica film or slag, definitely you would have much lower impacts here, and you can meet the goals, either your goal or whatever you are motivated to meet. Or if you replace pumice, if it's locally available, obviously, then you would reduce your lightweight aggregate goals, impacts. So this is an analysis based on what we have done at Climate Earth. This is not representative of industry average. This is just based on our data. But we are talking about over 95,000 EPDs we have produced. And you guys can, and the graph on top right is for masonry, and this graph is for ready-mix concrete. So again, you guys can see over years, your global warming, the concrete producer's global warming potential has reduced. I don't want to say dramatically, but that's good enough. And that's a good sign. Although there are some years that are tricky, like if you look at ranges like 2019, 2020, 2018, like in that range, you guys can see there's an increase in our trends. And probably that's because, I mean, in 2016, people who had EPDs, they were super motivated about the concept of sustainability. Probably they have had nice mixed designs, carbon voice, and and then by 2020, it was required and by many of the parties and agencies or government, and then all of the producers who wanted to sell their products, they need an EPD, obviously. So that's why they started getting EPDs through our tool, and they were not necessarily mixed design with supplementary cementitious materials or so. That's why you may see an increase in that year. But eventually, they have also reduced the impacts by 2025. And the nice thing about this trend is that um, all three modules, A1, A2, and A3, has reduced, which is the good sign. But we are here with you to help you understand your major drivers. We are here to help you understand the hottest spots and offer some alternative solutions. And that's your part to see if they're like if you're technically okay or not to use that replacement. But we are here to give you some ideas how you guys can reduce your impacts and eventually move towards net zero. So that's our goal here. So I would stop share and pass it to Brian to keep going.
Okay, great, perfect. Thank you, Hossein. I think the segue that you were setting up was quite nice, right? Strategic decision making for optimal operations through EPD data is one of the points that was mentioned as the topic of this call. And let's see, we'll get to it. Share my screen. Sorry for any and all technical difficulties. All right, perfect. So that's where we were with Hossein. And I think he's right. And so the other day, yesterday, I was talking through this in my head when we were at a practice session. And I just couldn't help but think, like, I don't know if there's ever another time in which a ready mix producer is going to look inward, in which they do when they do an environmental product declaration, right? I mean, yes, there are times where a specific person at a ready mix plant looks at the material. And then there's possibly, if you're a larger corporation, you look at logistics or you have a dispatch team, right? You might have an operations manager or some technicians that are keeping the plant running, and understanding your accounting department might keep a finger on the pulse for utility bills and ancillary materials and water and waste, or you might have an EHS person. But when at one time do you look inwards like you do when you're going through data collection to quantify and report the environmental impacts of your materials? Where you have to understand all of your production materials, and you have to look and find out how you're getting said production materials to your facility and what your operational impacts are. Like, that's what we're doing when we work with these companies, to set them up with even just the ability to know what their environmental impacts are. And I think it's a unique opportunity that we should be doing more with that data. And I think that the way we've set our stuff up and the way that the software is entering the industry, we're going to be able to do that better. I think we're going to start allowing data sharing and common experiences across applications. Producers will have the ability to look at how all their plants are performing at a company level, at a region level, at a product level, to dig down into it like that and find out where you need to prioritize your time or help standardize and improve performance, right? It's not just global warming potential, but like I could look at a breakdown of A1, A2, A3 of all of the products in my portfolio, and maybe see outliers under A3 and say, hey, maybe it's time to update that plant. Maybe that plant needs a little TLC. Like these are higher numbers, or why am I getting outlandish A2 numbers for trucking in my aggregates? Maybe there's a better way, right? And I think that's pretty much the direction that it'll go to. And hopefully, if we can get buy-in from producers and companies to really prioritize this data and get more out of it, then I think that that would be a win for me. I think enterprise-wide visibility into your whole entire portfolio, especially with these companies that are vertically integrated and produce Portland cement and have quarries and have ready mix facilities and own terminals. Like it's a single pane of glass that you can monitor and manage that entire portfolio through one intuitive dashboard is really cool. And I'm not saying that it's just one singular dashboard that does it. I mean, there will be opportunities and applications throughout the whole entire industry that make their lives easier, and we're happy to be a part of that. I think that GWP has grown into a criteria in a mixed design, like Hossein was saying. I know workability and durability and strength will always be paramount, and cost and price isn't associated to that, but embodied carbon from specification, as this group and the AEC community would know, is just as important. And I think the way that we look at it and try to achieve advantage is by gaining insights into what the company's doing from a carbon performance level across all of our plants. Quickly identifying mix requirements to speed up decision making, being able to compare mix design analysis to unlock silos. Maybe like why can't I look at a dashboard of carbon performance at a plant level and say, wow, whoever's doing my mix design or who's ever creating these performance-based mix designs, that X plant, why are we not sharing these best practices with plant Y? Right? Same thing. Like you might want to look at plants in your portfolio in the same region that are producing the same mix designs, and figure out why they have varying embodied carbon performance. Raw material availability plays a piece of this, but so could talent discrepancies, where the simple fix would be training by top performers. I think that's kind of an interesting way to start looking at this curated data set. You can dig further into comparisons of mixed designs. Like Hossein had mentioned this earlier, there will be a point, and everyone is on board with this, that we can only go so low from a material standpoint. I wholly do believe that. I know that there is a ton of innovation out there, and it will get into the operations side of it. But from a straight material standpoint, there is probably a cap, right? So we must identify vulnerable points, and maybe that's in our supply chain. Maybe that's how we get said raw materials and end products to our plant. Maybe it's diversifying suppliers to minimize material and transport impacts. I hate to quote industry talking points, and I'm not trying to do that at all, but we hear over and over again about prescriptive versus performance. And prescriptive versus performance requires comparisons showing real-time improvements that are possible while still achieving necessary strengths and durability. I do wholly think that the AEC community could get actively involved with ready mix producers who we're training on software that make them much more informed to think about it from an embodied carbon perspective. I get to work with fantastic people every day who do this. They're very knowledgeable. They want to be included in the conversation, and I think that they have the data to back up why they should be. Some interesting things that are happening in software is obviously different strength curves, and everyone knows that there are different curves. And one of the curves that we like to play around with is the tarantula curve. And so, like, showing smaller producers who don't have extra silos to store SCMs and just have, traditional raw materials, and, kind of speaking to them about performance-based mixed designs is quite intriguing. But that said, producer could drop a mixed design into a customization system, and it would allow them to optimize for material cost, performance, and embodied carbon, right? Like, we work with these producers, we pull the data from their life cycle assessment, and we can help them configure how to optimize in ways that make the most sense for them as a company, for the job, and for the region. And it's just basically trying to help QC managers work better and work easier and work faster, and try to make their lives a little bit easier. And there's a ton of stuff like this that's coming to market. It's just exciting to be a part of it. This is really fun. So we're pulling life cycle assessment data for every mix design that has an EPD that's associated with it. Now, when it comes to whole building reporting, and I've seen multiple people, I think I just sat on an NRMCA thing, they were talking about whole building reporting, and reduction is becoming increasingly popular. And I think it makes sense, right? Project-based design and reporting capabilities understand that some mixes will require faster set times and higher strengths. I don't think there's an argument there. Other mixes, such as foundations, will utilize mixes with a lower carbon footprint. Now, we can look at something and still reduce by a percentage, but by a total budget as opposed to just an individual mix design. And this concept won't be foreign to anyone on the call. I think I saw Nathan, and I've spoken with him before about ACI 323 and all that. But it's like the ability to build out project reports and attach EPDs to them is readily available, and I think it's kind of a really cool way to look through that lens of embodied carbon. I'm going to say it again, A2 will be universally strategic point for customers making carbon informed decisions in the next decade. I wholly believe this. I think that the piece that I want to be involved with is whenever I'm working with a producer in one of any of the 1,400 plants that we're in all through North America, right? I want them to be able to automatically analyze the mode of transport, different routes, and calculate the cost of doing so in a single click. And there's no reason we can't do that. There's no reason that I can't have all of the locations of all the raw material suppliers and where your plants are located, and say, this is where you could be getting it from. Like, have you ever thought to maybe use a glass pozzolan? Have you thought about reaching out to urban mining? What would be the lowest carbon way to get said product to your facility? Oh, cool. We'll take it by rail to a terminal, and then we'll truck it over. Great. Here's the cost of the product and what that cost would be associated to get it to your facility. And then we can immediately drop it into a system that shows actualized embodied carbon reductions by using such a product. And that's just an example of a ground glass pozzolan. I can do that with any. We can do that with any, right? We can look at different variations of raw materials, and hey, I need to get below a specific number. What if I use this cement? What if I use that cement? What if I looked in this? Like, you can look at your region and all the raw materials that are available and start to like be progressive with your decision making if your ranked tier is GWP, or if your ranked tier is cost, or if your ranked tier is performance-based mix designs or paste content or any other tier. Like, there's a lot more data in this whole entire process that we do other than just GWP. And I think saving our customers hours of sales or dispatch or QC time is the right direction. Now, I don't know where my time's at. So I will finish up by just mentioning one really cool thing that EPD is coming to the EPD landscape, and how fun it is, and what I'm very excited about. And I'm going to do it in kind of a funny way. So I was working through the PowerPoint yesterday, and I went to my friend GPT. And I said, GPT, help me word this sentence right here in a better way, right? Like, help a country boy from North Carolina, South Carolina, explain to the CLF people that we're very excited to share some innovative approaches on how to utilize a curated data set. Pretty straightforward sentence. GPT told me, that sounds like you turn raw data into compelling narratives and using visualizations and contextual insights that lead to carbon-informed decision-making at different points in the supply chain. I said, well, that sure sounds a lot better than what I did. And it's an example of historical mixed designs. I mean, why couldn't we do the same thing? Like mixed designs that you've been using for years and years and years. Why couldn't you just do the same thing? Why couldn't you take it and look at it from a different angle? And that's exactly what we're doing. That's exactly what other companies are doing, right? We're just going to do it differently. So there are probably hundreds and thousands of men and women hours put into building out environmental product declaration since 2013. I mean, you think about it, we've been doing it for 12 years now. Hossein mentioned it earlier. We've created 90,000 environmental product declarations, which is pretty crazy. So during that time, yeah, I'd say we built out the largest low carbon concrete database. And it sounds like the perfect thing that we could put an AI agent into and model train it. And what that's going to allow producers to do is input project parameters from specs, such as water to cement ratio, SCM percentage, paste content, shrinkage, criteria, like everything. Anything they can pull from a spec, they can put into a tool that's going to have mix limits. And they can click a button and say, find me a mix. Comb through the largest low carbon concrete database in the whole entire world and find me a mix that meets all of these specs. And what it's going to create for them is an industry leading starting point where they can send that off to their lab, see if it reaches strength, and then they can move forward. And it's just really exciting to think about the changes in the directions that are coming that will affect stuff like this and different manufacturing processes and all that good stuff. And yeah, so that is what is new. And I'll stop share.
Wow, that was phenomenal. Thank you. I think I haven't seen a webinar from this perspective before, so it was really great. Thank you so much. Do we have some questions?
I have a few questions and just kind of strike up a good conversation here. First off, thanks, Brian. Thanks, Hussein. I'm going to share just a LinkedIn post that I had recently seen as kind of a jumping off point around, I think this, so our group is largely practitioners and, people advocating like pretty clued into the embodied carbon space. And one thing I think is kind of a question or place that I'd be curious to learn more about is how we're continuing to advance like the accuracy of these things. And this post kind of shows how concrete EPDs often utilize generic or non-supplier specific data. I'd love to hear from you guys kind of how that's continuing to evolve. And, maybe something I was thinking too, Brian, while you were talking, it's like you mentioned A2 is going to be really important. Do you think that's like underrepresented because a lot of this data is generic, or like where are our blind spots still and how are we trying to action that? I also say, I think it's great that your platform is like instantaneous feedback and all the data things, everything that you mentioned is great, but just, yeah, whatever direction you want to take that question.
So I'm going to pass the supplier specific data to Hossein, but I will say one quick thing about this is when you connect an information management system throughout like North America and drop product specific EPDs into a drop down menu for every single ready mix producer, I think you are going to start to encourage cement suppliers, aggregate producers, SCM producers to start going down the route of getting supplier specific. Like there's no like you go and get a supplier specific EPD, and then I can put it as a menu item in all of the ready mix producers, 1,400 plants across North America. It's a sales opportunity for you to increase the demand of your product. You know that all 1,400 of our ready mix producers prioritize and want to lower the embodied carbon. That's why you would get set up with a generator to begin with. So now you're encouraging cement suppliers or SCMs or people who are kind of getting into that innovative space to try to lower their carbon footprint to become more enticing as a menu offering to our producers. And I think that would lead to more supplier specific. But as far as regional availability, I'll let Hossein talk to that since he handles all of our LCA stuff.
Plus, I was at ACLC and I was at this specific presentation. So, number one, the data she presented is based on a journal paper which is created like 2 or 3 years ago. So this is not up to date. Like for a person who is based in Michigan, I was offended at her presentation that there's no EPD in Michigan, while I know Superior Concrete at least has EPDs. So I was like, this is not up to date. I didn't ask her at her presentation. So, Michiganders are different. But anyway, what I want to say is that the PCRs for ready mix and block are going to be very, very specific this time. So they are not going to be nice anymore, and they are going to recommend supplier specific LCIs for raw materials. And for those that do not want to get their manufacturer specific EPDs, like especially major drivers like cement, we are going to overestimate some of the impacts. So that's a motivation for them to get their own EPDs eventually. The same is happening in block and paver. So we are going to be really tough about those that do not want to have their own specific impacts. That's our future, and we have to do that. The other part of her presentation was really interesting to me, just FYI, was regional averages and or benchmarking instead of just, I mean, the NRMC regions are too wide. They're not representative of small towns in different areas. So we have to be more specific when it comes to different regions based on availability of raw materials and condition of primary roads, secondary roads, and weather or whatever, right? So that was the other piece that she addressed, and that was nice to present that at the conference. And we have to have very specific regional benchmarking for raw materials and finished concrete, and we have to know, like, if they're using supplier specific SCMs, supplementary cementitious materials in their mix designs or not. So we have to know that. If we know those specific benchmarks, that would push suppliers to get their own EPDs. Now they're lazy to do that because we have a wide regions and they're not representative. So
One quick follow-up for Nate, I see your hands up just with the PCR, Hussein. You said that it's going to be, is it required, or you're just saying it's going to be docked in the next PCR? Like you have to take a conservative estimate if it isn't supplier specific?
correct. And the next ready mix PCR will be effective next year, early next year.
Cool.
So
yeah,
and block PCR in Q1 of next year. So it's gonna happen.
nice. Yeah, and I would definitely want the more regional specific. I know that's been on the radar for NRMCA's update, but I don't know when we're gonna get that. But Nate, I'll kick it to you.
I have so much to say right now.
I'm excited. Yeah.
I've been furiously making notes here on things I want to say. First of all, I guess Brian and Hussein, thank you very much for a great presentation, and thanks also to Luke and the CLF crew all in for hosting this. I think it's a good topic, a good conversation, and I'm frustrated and disappointed that there aren't more of us here in this meeting. Let's see where to jump off. I would say, Hossein, first, I'm sorry we didn't connect in Atlanta because I was also sitting in Michaela's presentation last week, and if I'd realized who you were, I would have definitely come over and struck up a conversation. Yeah, one thing I was going to say about her particular presentation that you posted about there, Luke, is that one, she did a really, really excellent job with the graphics. She has just a mastery of visually presenting really complicated data. But the question that I asked in the presentation, and I didn't press the issue because it wasn't the right place, was that a lot of that data that she was analyzing was based on EPDs extracted from the EC3 database. And Climate Earth does a pretty good job in the EPDs that I've reviewed of listing, is this a C150 cement or is this a C595, otherwise a blended cement? Is there a 618 material in here? Probably a fly ash, but possibly something else. Is there a C989 material in here? Slag, right? And there's other basic ASTMs, but not all EPD producers have that, right? And so that's a shortcoming, and I'm hopeful that, well, frankly, that the rest of the community will get on board and be a bit more transparent with their data, because one particular slide, and this may, I guess I didn't realize it was saying that her data was a few years old. She had one particular slide up there showing the use of blended cements, and what, again, I didn't make issue of it, but my big takeaway was the data that she presented could not possibly be correct, because the USGS tells us that blended cements are about 65% of the US cements now, and she was showing something like 15 or 20%. I said, this cannot possibly be right. So I really like what she's doing, and I hope she's able to kind of redo that with more recent information. Let's see, on the next topic of Luke, I think you mentioned this as well, on local benchmarking. This is a really important topic. I would wholeheartedly agree, and I think NRMCA additionally would wholeheartedly agree that the regions are much, much too large. I mean, the concrete being made in San Jose has nothing to do with San Diego, and it's vastly different from what they're doing in Reno. The good news is that NRMCA appears poised to release a new regional average report, their V4, this year. Fingers crossed, exactly. I had a good long conversation in Atlanta, actually, with Matthew LeMay, who runs that program at NRMCA, and also Tiffany Reed via Real. We went to dinner and talked about that quite a bit. They've got certain, because of the fact that they're a trade association, they've got certain considerations for how they can do regions, right? They have to have a minimum number of companies and plants represented and things like this, so that they're not at any risk of giving anything away, of what competitors in that market are doing. That's part of the explanation for the big regions. But on a related topic, this exact topic of being able to have procedures available to establish a local concrete benchmark is what ACI 323 subcommittee C that I chair will be taking on. So, if anybody here is interested in participating with that, I have room for you on my subcommittee. And, as opposed to many ACI committees and subcommittees, we're going to do most of our work virtually. I don't have any expectations of people traveling to New Orleans and Baltimore and Boston and Philadelphia and wherever else, right? We're going to be meeting just like this on Zoom. And that same subcommittee is also tackling the question of what is an appropriate reduction factor, right? In the initial version of 323, we said, okay, 15%. If you're 15% below the regional, that is low carbon. And that may be a reasonable number in some markets, and it may not in others, and it's going to depend a lot on what kind of materials are available in that market. I understand, and Hossein, maybe you guys were talking about this while I was taking notes and wasn't fully paying attention, so forgive me if I'm repeating something that was already said here. The forthcoming version of the ready-mix concrete PCR that's out for review now. If anybody wants to get in there and download it and review it and send comments, you can. You have about 3 weeks left to review that PCR document. Tiffany Reed via Real NRMCA, who runs that, tells me that if primary data, as in, facility specific cement EPD data, if it is available, it must be used. And I will tell you, from my perspective, in the cement industry here in California, all California cement plants have facility specific EPDs, and all of them are lower than the national average. So going forward, I suppose if you find that somebody's using industry average data as opposed to California data, that will be a tip off that they're using an imported cement source. I guess that's all I have, but thank you for letting me
2
dominate the
points.
conversation for a couple minutes.
Sure. Two points. Number one, even imported cement sources are getting their own EPDs. Either Turkey,
Good.
Greece, different countries. They're getting Vietnam. One in Latin America. They're getting EPDs based on ISO 21930. And the other point about regional benchmarks, I think I don't see a future of doing benchmarks based on what one RMC is doing. I mean, we should stop collecting specific data for benchmarks. I think big benchmarks must be done based on our data, WOPS data, pathways, or whoever is doing EPDs in this market. We have over 95,000 EPDs, and we can and WAP is the same, right? So we own those benchmarks, and we have for every specific part of every specific state, and which is damn accurate. So this must be the future of doing benchmarking for either an RMCA or Masonry or whoever wanted to do that. So
if you were working to establish a benchmark there where there was already a robust footprint of EPDs for the materials, that wouldn't be too tough. We have to have a procedure, though, I think, that considers a market without EPDs. And perhaps there's no overlap between authority having jurisdiction, right, vis-a-vis a city or a county government agency that could implement a building code. Maybe there's no overlap between the location of those agencies and the areas that have no EPDs, but a desire to have a low carbon spec. Maybe that doesn't exist. But we also need, we need to have some kind of a way to evaluate the concrete mixes that are being used and come up with, an EPD estimate of some kind, or GHG estimate would be a better term, sorry, of some kind, so that you could develop some sort of average for that area, that physical area.
that makes a lot of sense. But good points, though. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah.
While we're on the topic of benchmarks, and maybe just need to join your committee, Nate, but I'm very curious to hear your thoughts as well. Hossein, you mentioned you have a lot of data, tens of thousands of EPDs, right? I'm curious if you have information on the actual application of those mixes, like how it's used on projects. And I'm curious what role that has in future benchmarks. Part of me gets concerned when we're, comparing, 5,000 PSI foundations with PT slabs and saying, okay, they're not functionally equivalent, right? So why should we compare them as such? And I know it's a big can of worms, but I'm just curious to hear your thoughts on that as well.
Oh yeah, we should not. That's a good point. Yeah, we should be very, very specific and collect more information for mixed designs when we are doing the benchmarking and analyze that. And it's not only what you mentioned, as Nathan clearly mentioned. We should also compare mixes with 30% SCM, and then it depends which SCM, with 0% because they're in Colorado and they're mobile plants, and they don't have access to fly ash in a certain time of the year. So it's not only what you mentioned, it's way more than that. So we have to be very, very specific when we are doing benchmarking, for sure.
Yeah,
we are talking with NRMCA about that. We actually met them yesterday about this.
Good.
So
yeah, my understanding is that's not being incorporated into the next PCR, but I also haven't read that open review comment?
There was a long discussion about it, very, very long, and there was a list of 12 different criteria to be required. And I think the concrete producers voted for 3 or 4 eventually. So
Yeah.
they were not motivated to do that.
Yeah.
But one thing that I saw in the PCR is like, I saw a potential to update that PCR every year or every 2 years, like the quick updates. And then that's where we can push more on that. So step by step, but tiny steps are probably what's happening right now. So very, very good point. I'm with you. I would second that.
So we have a question from Bruce. Bruce, you wanna ask your question?
Very good
Mhm.
question. Other than GWP, we also have some other impacts that are required for the lead. And I was actually at the lead V5 presentation, but I forgot if they added more impact categories or not. Sorry. But yeah, there are more impact at acidification, aerification, and then fossil fuels and stuff like that. They're required by the lead. I think they are going to be our next goals to focus on. But as of 2025, it's all about GWP, and we are just fighting with carbon market and all that stuff. We are so passionate to focus on some of those impacts because they are also important. The environmental burdens are really, really as important as GWP, but unfortunately, there's social objection on that in the producers. How we can change that culture, I'm not an expert, but I think you guys can help. So
I mean, just starting to talk about it is a good place, I think. And even some of the healthy debate from that presentation. It's great that you guys are there. And I'm sure those folks who are doing the research also are keen to have the latest and best information that they can incorporate and make good decisions. Any other questions from folks? I have a few more, but I also don't want to totally. Rochelle, any thoughts from you as a CLF?
As a CLFer, I guess this is one because you did touch upon ChatGPT, so I guess we'll ask this one. But how is AI being incorporated into mix design and mix designs and GWP estimates? And is Climate Earth working with any companies like AI Crete or Concrete AI?
Great question. Here's the full honest answer. Like, you can AI agent needs a large database to process and model and improve upon. And a good AI agent will learn from user experience and start to understand how they do their work and where it can be improved upon. What we've done is created a database of 90,000 environmental product declarations, where probably over half of those were designed and created with the idea of lowering the embodied carbon, right? And so we have our own database. It's aggregated and it's anonymous, but we have our own database that we've deployed AI agent on, and we're going to be putting it into our tool to help ready mix producers. And I think the example that I gave during the presentation is like, there are going to be, we work with a varying mix of producers, right? Like, we have enterprise level partners, and then I got guys that own 3 or 4 plants, and they don't want to be unable to bid, or they got one DOT a job a year and they have to get it, right, to stay afloat and stay in business. But like, when it comes to lowering embodied carbon, and this guy's got 3 or 4 plants, doesn't have a whole lot of silos, can't store SCMs, what can he do? right? And that's like the person that I'm trying to reach. Be like, I got you. Let me work with you, get you to where you need to be. Whether we're tri-blending aggregates, we're reducing particle packing. Like I know it's still got to be workable and durable and strength, but like let's partner together. Let's take the largest low carbon database that's available in the world. Let's run your mix design through it and let's get you to like an industry leading starting point and like let's help you. Like the last thing that I want to happen is like, well, I mean, I'm not gonna no. Hossein has already called producers lazy. So I hope this recording never sees the light of
Let's be
day. I won't
controversial.
I won't get into that. I'm a strong champion of small to mid-size ready mix producers. It's just I like working with them as much as I like working with larger people, and I think that I don't want to lose the industry experience and knowledge that they have. I think that embodied carbon and GWP is probably foreign to a lot of them. But I've made it a point of what I do day to day to make their lives easier and to make like what seems overwhelming and stressful and what they think is a completely foreign concept, something that they actually like were already doing. We're just going to walk them through it.
Super important. Yeah, I really appreciate that perspective, Brian. It really does take, if we're gonna achieve, what we're trying to achieve, really does take everybody. And you look at like the proportion of concrete that is produced by small to mid, and I bet it is the majority. We have a
Yeah.
similar thing on SC 2050 of like trying to engage small firms because there's just so many people out there doing this work, right?
Yeah. Yeah,
One,
it's interesting. Like I'm not even going to bring it back to benchmarks or any silly stuff like that. But it's like, yeah, like producers in urban developments, like yeah, they're probably encouraged more to be set up with the understanding of what their GWP is. But like there are people outside of urban environments, like in the state of Minnesota, who like, what? No, we're not like, I don't know what you're even talking about. I've never even heard like 2025, never even heard this, don't know what you're talking
yeah,
about. We're not going to do it. Right. And so
yeah.
we partner with associations and fight for grant funding for people just like that. So we can at least get them halfway there.
And I think Tarek hit the nail on the head there. It's not that people are lazy or don't care, oftentimes at least. But it's just not structured in a way that it's incentivized, right? And I think that's another thing that you hit on where you talked a bit about like cost and innovation. I mean, that's someplace that everybody is looking to kind of improve. And if there is a business case, going back to the very beginning of our conversation of like, it is about climate economy, right? Like how do we make this, and reducing carbon should reduce costs because you're using less material, you're being more efficient, or you're using less energy to make that happen. So definitely building that out. I shared just in the chat too that the tool that Climate Earth worked with NRMCA on, which I think is good for places that don't have EPDs. It's something I've used before, where if you have a mixed design, it plugs in industry average data. You can sort of play with like uh, how does how do certain aspects of the mixed design change the expected global warming potential. I'm curious, a follow-up question to that is, so for designers, I think that dashboard that you showed, Brian, is not sure proprietary is the right word, but it's more aimed for ready mix suppliers. Is that right? And how would you recommend designers kind of collaborate with ready mix suppliers to kind of make those changes?
That's a interesting question, and it's something that we've been kind of floating around internally recently. I have kind of a makeshift designer tool. Funny enough, it's called Concrete Designer, right? And it takes sometimes industry average impacts from different material sources, and then sometimes we can throw like companies that have created EPDs and actual product specific GWPs, and it's basically a slimmed down version of our tool, which allows structural engineers and people like that to go in, build out a mixed design that they'll eventually be speccing show what a realistic global warming potential would be for that said mix design, and allows them to kind of get more and more comfortable with the process. Like if I'm going to spec something that's got a specific water to cement ratio, has a specific SCM percentage, and needs to meet these specific requirements, well, what's the actual GWP? Like not looking at a specific average or trying to get 15% below a specific average, but like real world, what's it likely going to be? And then a producer who does have even further down the supply chain specific EPDs should be able to meet or likely, get below that. When am I shipping that? I don't know.
Yeah, yeah.
I
That was
don't
gonna be
know.
my next question.
I don't know. When do
I'll-
I ship it? Probably in the future sometime. I mean, we want to encourage people to work together, and we said it multiple times, like, right, like we build tools to help producers have a conversation with the AEC community, and that's the only way it's going to work if we're all working together cohesively, like them involved in the conversation, them telling you what's possible. And then, yeah, like we already have our eyes set on building out something that would make your lives easier and actually give you like a real world depiction of where your embodied carbon goals should be or could be. And then, if we give it to enough smart people, maybe they'll come up with innovative ways to reduce it as well.
Well, I'm definitely gonna follow up with you, and would be keen once that's ready for prime time to get it out to like the broader SE 2050 group is what I'm thinking.
Yeah,
But,
we would be happy to have that conversation. I think yeah, just let's connect and we'll work something out.
great. Well, I think we need to end it there. We're mindful of your time and just want to thank you both again. Rochelle, anything else you want to add?
No, we just want to say thank you so much for being here. And yeah, it was maybe a small group, but it's the quality, not the quantity. And I think it was one of the best webinars we've had. And so thank you so much. I think the smaller group also lended itself to having a lot more discussion. So really appreciate
I
it.
appreciate, yeah, I've said on too many of these things and it's like questions and it's crickets, right?
Yeah.
So it's nice to have an impassioned dialogue with people who I think we're kind of all aligned on the same goals.
Absolutely. Well, thanks, y'all.
Okay.
Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.